As we speak, Chicago is hosting Lollapalooza, a massive music festival, despite the fact that, unfortunately, new cases of coronavirus are in fact spreading and spiking. The city's largest music festival is being held at full capacity from July 29th to August 1st. It comes at a time when the city is seeing its average daily number of new coronavirus cases more than double in a matter of weeks. Now, for the purposes of this Decode segment, I'm not going to get into how frustrating the spread of the Delta variant is, but it is important to at least consider why a massive music festival will be held or is being held as the numbers of new cases is spiking. And it's because of course, the profit motive behind these music festivals. And so that got me thinking about the profit motive, but more importantly, something that's kind of been whitewashed in the media, the notion of millennials wanting to avoid spending money on things in order to spend their limited resources on experiences. And the fact of the matter is, it's part of this economy that economists, capitalists have been talking about for decades now. It's known as the experience economy. And when you really hone in on what makes the experience economy succeed and how it allows for capitalists to control our amusement, our entertainment, the more pleasurable parts in our lives, it can get incredibly infuriating because we should be able to control what we do or how we enjoy our free time. But when it comes to music festivals, as fun as they might seem, there have been some pretty massive hiccups. So in fact, that human desire for something that's been exploited and commodified by capitalists for profit is what's referred to as the experience economy. Here's a little more about it.
In the past 20 years, the Western world has shifted from buying things to buying these kinds of things. In other words, experiences.
My name is Joe Pine, and I'm going to tell you all about the experience economy.
Joe has written a book called, The Experience Economy.
Well, what's happened is we've gone from an agrarian economy based off commodities, through an industrial economy based off goods, to a service economy, and today we're in an experience economy. What experiences really do is that they engage everyone inside of them.
And it's all designed to create this unique communal experience.
Living in the digital age that we are now, there's more need than ever for people to connect. That's what festivals do the best.
I mean, it's ironic, isn't it? Because when you really take a step back and you look at what capitalism supports or endorses, which is individualism, while shunning collectivism, then they try to find ways to exploit the isolation or the alienation that we might feel as a result of the capitalist system, right? And to be sure, we were already feeling that alienation, that isolation, that atomized way of living prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has only exacerbated that. So it's completely understandable that humans have this need, this desire for community. Those are the experiences that they crave. And it's only gotten worse, or at least that urge has only become more pronounced in people's lives during coronavirus-related shutdowns and social distancing. Now, again, capitalism celebrates individualism while shunning collectivism. Workers feel alienation from other people because they're either seen as their competitors for scarce resources and wages, and it's also very easy for people to be alienated from others when they're constantly working and have very little time for rest or for pleasure or for communicating or connecting with others. In other words, capitalism leads to the alienation of workers, and then it finds ways to benefit from it and profit from it by offering so-called experiences. Now, the Harvard Business Review was already advising businesses on how to exploit alienated people looking for more meaning in their lives, looking for more community in their lives. In fact, they wrote, quote, "An experience occurs when a company intentionally uses services as the stage and goods as props to engage individual customers in a way that creates a memorable event. Commodities are fungible, goods tangible, services intangible, and experiences memorable." But do we really want the capitalist class to decide which experiences in our lives are memorable? Do we want them to tailor certain experiences for us to experience a sense of community? Now, music festivals are actually a great example of what the Harvard Business Review had written about, because the music is merely a prop. The experience, large masses of people letting loose together, is the experience.
A 10-year British audience survey revealed that headline acts are a deciding factor for only 8% of festival goers, but 53% said the overall experience is the reason they bought their ticket. We asked these festival goers why they're here.
Hey! No, what?
A lineup will drag me in, but when I'm here, sometimes I don't even see any music.
I'll be honest, I don't know any of the friggin' music.
It's nothing to do with the music, it's all atmosphere.
Nothing to do with the music. It's all atmosphere. And listen, that's fine. But let's understand what that atmosphere is about. It's about a sense of togetherness, about celebrating something together with your fellow humans, something that we're not able to do on a day-to-day basis. Now, look, a good case study is actually Woodstock. The story of Woodstock in the summer of 1969, of course, has been rewritten and romanticized, which I didn't really know about until fairly recently. That myth was then capitalized in the 1990s when the same men behind the original Woodstock decided to create subsequent Woodstocks in 1999 and, by the way, 1994, which for the most part went off without a hitch. But we should focus a little bit on the 1999 Woodstock because it was a disaster. Now, Woodstock 99 ended in riots as attendees whipped up by 3 days of anarchy-fueled music burned the fairgrounds. 44 were arrested. There were 10 reported sexual assaults, but a cursory glance at the footage, male attendees groping topless women with glee, assures there were many more. In fact, there's a fantastic documentary about this called Woodstock 99 on HBO. It's relatively new, and I highly recommend it. The facilities collapsed under the weight of 200,000 visitors. Over 1,200 were treated for medical conditions. 3 people actually died. Now, Woodstock 99 was riddled with the failures of capitalism, from its deceptive marketing to its price gouging. The marketing for Woodstock 99, again, relied on the romanticism and revised history of the original Woodstock in 1969. Although the concert became free when an expected crowd of 200,000 grew 500,000 strong, it was actually conceived as a business proposition. The 1969 Woodstock Music Festival was the brainchild of 4 men, all aged 27 or younger, looking for an investment opportunity. John Roberts, Joel Rosenman, Artie Cornfield, and Michael Lang. Lang had organized the successful Miami Music Festival in 1968, and Cornfield was the youngest vice president at Capitol Records. Roberts and Rosenman were New York entrepreneurs involved in building a Manhattan recording studio. So we're talking about businessmen looking to put together a music festival for profit. But things didn't really work out the way that they intended. And as a result, there were literally hundreds of thousands of people who were able, and I think this is a good thing, to enjoy the music festival for free. But here's the problem. It wasn't really a feel-good time in a lot of cases. And this next video will explain why.
As one official pointed out, with 300,000 people, you are not dealing with just a crowd, but virtually a city. And as a city, it had city problems. One youngster died of a suspected overdose of heroin. 80 others were arrested on drug charges. Another boy killed when the driver of a tractor failed to see him inside a sleeping bag.
What happened at White Lake this weekend may have been more than an uncontrolled outpouring of hip young people, struggling as they did to survive. First, the 20-mile traffic jams, 5-mile hikes. Then the intense heat and sudden rain, the thirst and hunger from the shortage of water and food, just for the opportunity to spend a few days in the country getting stoned on their drugs and grooving on the music.
And grooving on the music. I love that news report. It was actually a pretty fair news report by CBS back in 1969, which you can check out on YouTube, and I highly recommend it. Now, the entrepreneurs behind the original Woodstock happen to be the exact same guys looking to make a buck off music festivals and merchandising today. Woodstock Ventures, the firm that oversees the licensing and intellectual property related to the Woodstock Festival, is still run by the original producers of the event. And for several decades now, that once ragtag group of hippies has evolved into, if they weren't already, good businessmen with savvy instincts. Now, that's an older Reuters piece, and to be clear, their instincts ain't so savvy, especially when you're putting festivals together with the very clear financial interest. They want to make a profit off of these events. And as we know, the best way to make a profit is to minimize costs and maximize the profits. So one can understand why they would want to rewrite history or the history of Woodstock, because Woodstock Ventures also happens to be the same group of guys behind Woodstock 94 and 99. So they made a bunch of dumb decisions with Woodstock 99 by choosing a military base in the middle of the summer as the venue for the event. Take a look.
Woodstock 99 was held on Griffiths Air Force Base. Constructed in the 1940s, the base was used for military aircraft maintenance. There were some areas of turf, but for the most part, Woodstock 99 happened on 1,100 acres of airplane runways. The grounds were so expansive, visitors had to travel 1.5 miles between two main stages. This is how Rolling Stone journalist Rob Sheffield described the scene. It was a few miles of asphalt surrounded by barbed wire. There were a few patches of grass. But for instance, if you were looking for some grass to lie down on, you're not going to lie under a tree or on a hillside. You're not going to see any flowers. It was a place that was designed to house jet fighters. Kevin Wasserman, the Offspring's lead guitarist, you know him as Noodles, was even more critical of the locale. We played this festival in Nuremberg at an old Third Reich park. So I've played a venue that was literally built by Hitler, that was more hospitable than that Air Force base was.
But the event's organizers were giddy once they secured that military base as the venue for, ironically, Woodstock 99, right? Like let that irony sink in for a second. Why were they so giddy about it? Well, if you're doing this music festival on a military base, then you have this infrastructure at your disposal that can prevent people from sneaking into the concert for free. They weren't going to let that original mistake of Woodstock, at 69 happen again. They wanted to ensure that everyone who was there paid the ticket to be there. And so, of course, you're dealing with asphalt in the middle of summer in Rome, New York. Temperatures are extremely high at 100 degrees, and asphalt increases the ground temperature. People were incredibly hot and grumpy as a result. And by the way, speaking of tickets for Woodstock 99, remember, this is 1999, sold for $150 and ballooned to $180 on the weekend. A single serving of pizza, meaning a slice of pizza, was $12. And guess what? The situation wasn't any better when it came to bottled water. Water sold for $4 a bottle. Unfortunately, free tap water was incredibly hard to come by as well.
Imagine around 250,000 people trapped in a concrete pen surrounded by barbed wire. Now imagine shutting off that population's water supply. Unless you were working the festival, that was your life for 4 straight days. Of course, festival attendees had 2 choices. They could either buy a 12-ounce bottle of water for $4, $6.20 if you adjust for inflation, or stand in line for free faucet water from spigots that were sparsely located up to a half-mile away from the main stages. The wait in these lines took hours. Eventually, people got frustrated by their shabby water conditions and started destroying the water spigots, their only free source of water.
So imagine being in that environment, right? The conditions on the ground, you're hot, you're dehydrated, you're being price gouged left and right when it comes to sustenance and hydration. And when violence finally did break out, at this concert or this music festival, some concert goers said the violence was directed at the high prices promoters charge for food, water, and merchandise, which is completely understandable. I mean, I'm not recommending violence, but when violence breaks out in response to that price gouging, in response to the horrible conditions on the ground, organizers should probably take a little responsibility for it. Now, believe it or not, it actually gets worse. The organizers of the festival skimped on security and also hired inexperienced randos who walked off on the job when things started to get a little sketchy. So even though the crowd wildly outnumbered the law enforcement presence, roughly 500 New York State troopers plus local PD, the authorities were supposed to have a little more support courtesy of volunteer security recruited from New York City. Volunteer meaning unpaid. However, many of those volunteers unceremoniously walked off the job by wandering off into the audience, leaving the police severely shorthanded when things got out of hand. So these event organizers who are putting this whole thing together for profit wanted to cut costs by refusing to hire professional security or refusing to pay actual state troopers or enough of those state troopers to do the job appropriately. They wanted to rely on free labor, and they paid the price for that. The organizers also didn't invest enough on the pumping out porta potties, which is an incredibly uncomfortable thing to talk about, but it's relevant. So there were at least 2,500 portable toilets acquired for Woodstock 99, but they began to overflow by the second day. The excess waste combined with dirt and spigot water to create a bacteria-infested cesspool that stretched the length of the grounds. But you know what? You think that's bad? It gets worse. It gets worse. So kids were complaining that sewage from overflowing toilets was going into their tents. They were sleeping in it. They couldn't believe that was what they were expected to live with. By the end of the festival, at least 1,200 tons of solid waste and 500,000 gallons of liquid waste were produced by concert goers. In fact, if you look at photos of the event, you'll see people who didn't realize that the mud wasn't really mud, it was raw sewage, just completely covered in that mud, covered in that raw sewage. I can't even imagine what that smelled like. Now, the conditions on the ground were miserable. People were hot, they were dehydrated, they were covered in literal shit. And the lineup of mostly new metal music also didn't help to calm the furious festival goers. The reboot of Woodstock for an audience mostly born after the original festival in 1969 was a proto-fire meltdown of grotesque American excess, a panoply of late 90s nonsense, Kid Rock strolling on stage in a white fur coat, Limp Bizkit as a main draw, mostly young white male Gen Xers paying to see new metal acts in a poorly managed swamp of filth. So they rioted.
The crowds are blowing up CO2 tanks from the tractor trailers. They got troops in there with riot gear. They're forcing everybody out. Mass chaos.
I mean, a lot of people, I think, are frustrated at the whole profit thing of this, but there's a different way to show it.
So one of the things that happened in the aftermath of this disastrous music festival was the organizers, the investors, the very people who put this literal shit show together, tried to blame the performers for the riot. I mean, the music, to be sure, it's new metal music. I mean, it is what it is. But they hired people like Limp Bizkit to do what Limp Bizkit does, right? They knew what his music was about. They knew what his performances looked like. And they tried to pass the blame on Limp Bizkit and his performance for what started the rioting. No. And this is true of other instances where something goes wrong in a company, where something goes wrong in a bank, like Wells Fargo, for instance. The workers are the scapegoats, not the investors, not the executives, it's the workers. And in this case, regardless of how you feel about the performers, regardless of how you feel about Limp Bizkit or his music, he's a worker in this case. He is working this music festival. And the capitalists behind it decide to try to throw him under the bus because they didn't want to take any blame for all of the horrible decisions they made all around in organizing this event. And really, this isn't just about Woodstock 99. It isn't about introducing more regulation to ensure that all of the issues that we see in this particular event are prevented in the future. Really, what we need to do is think about how workers can take control of not just their working conditions, but of their lives. Because if workers had a seat at the table, or if workers had control and power over their working conditions, then they wouldn't see others as competition for scarce resources. They wouldn't be as alienated as we are now from everything, including the work we do, including alienation from nature, because under a capitalist system, nature is just seen as something to exploit and extract natural resources from, right? We would see the world differently because there would be more to our lives than just producing profit for our bosses. And we would have more control over how much free time we have and what we do with that free time. We wouldn't have to rely on these music festivals or any other event that's put together by people who have a profit motive in order to feel connection to others. We would have the ability to, put some time aside to learn a musical instrument and maybe engage in a jam session if that's what we're interested in. And so we can actually enjoy the music without having corporate control of that experience. And so, yes, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to be super negative toward some of these events that you guys might actually be in favor of. And that's totally fine. But what I am arguing is that we need to have more control over our free time, how we use that free time, and not allow for others to cater to us in a way that might seem like it's tailored to our needs or our concerns. But more importantly, we need to have more control so people with a profit motive aren't making those decisions for us. And of course, even when it comes to the perfectly fine looking music festivals, they cost a lot of money to go to. What does that say for people who can't afford to go to these events? What does that say for people who want to have a sense of community but literally can't afford to do it because they're underpaid due to the decisions that their bosses make? So the real solution here, Nando, as you know, is for workers to have more control over their workplaces and their lives.
Well, I think the real solution is just because I've just your segment moved me because it was a socialist defense of Limp Bizkit, and I will admit to when I was a young lad at 14 in 1999, I had the Limp Bizkit album. I had the album. I listened to it, and now I feel better about myself because I recognize that Fred Durst, singer of Limp Bizkit, is a worker, and actually, he deserves all the protections that every other worker deserves. So I want to thank you for that, because I think now the solution should be to make him the the vice premier of the Politburo of the new workers state.
I didn't say all that. But but it is kind of funny how it's like, they made all these decisions to price gouge the hell out of people, hold this event at a military base in scorching temperatures, and then it's like, no, it's Limp Bizkit's fault that they rioted. It's Limp Bizkit. Come on.
Yeah. No, I mean, I haven't seen the documentary yet, but I remember that festival well. Like I remember that time really well. I was kind of like really into music throughout the 90s. I remember Woodstock 94 really well, which was also kind of a mess in that it was like a huge mudslide, and there's like a whole issue with Green Day. It was like a whole thing also, and they just kind of tried to recapture the magic of Woodstock 1969, which was a completely different era, both politically, but also was before kind of neoliberalism turned everything into like a profit machine, like literally every aspect of society. And by 1999, when neoliberalism was at its absolute peak in terms of its hegemony, they just do like this just grotesque profit grab, and it backfires like right in their face. I find it to be kind of poetic in a way.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And, they were planning on doing another one of these Woodstock festivals they announced it in 2019. So I think it was supposed to be held in 2020. It didn't work out. And I don't know. I guess it's one of the silver linings to the pandemic.
Yeah. Do you enjoy going to music festivals in general?
The last time I went to a music festival was in 2014. I did go to Coachella, and I have to admit, I had the time of my life. I did.
Okay, well, there you go.
So it's not like, oh, I'm not condemning music festivals. I just think that when you allow people with a profit motive to control everything about it, if it started off good, it's easy for it to devolve. And to be sure, Coachella has devolved quite a bit. I mean, that's why the last time I went was in 2013 or 2014. I can't remember.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how expensive they are. It's amazing how they profit like at every single turn. You know, there's, you know, the case of the water. I mean, this happens in like nightclubs as well, where like, you know, everyone's like hopped up on ecstasy and they get dry mouth, and then they just like jack up the prices of the water bottles. And in Spain, actually, like back in the day in the 90s, they used to turn off the water in the bathrooms, like in the in the sinks. They don't do that anymore because there was like some sort of like intervention from the government. But they used to, like, at these big nightclubs, they would turn off the water in order to force you to buy these like insanely expensive bottles of water when you're like hopped up on E and you got all the dry mouth. So yeah,
that's insane. It shows you though, like they know that you can die. They know that people are hopped up on E, right? They know that people can literally die if they don't have access to water. And they're like, no, we got to make money off of it. We got to exploit the possibility of these people dying to make a buck.
Yeah.